Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be exploring the astrology of February 2025. So this month we're going to see quite a build-up of energy in the sign Pisces, so I'm going to be exploring that as we go along. We will see Jupiter, which is the co-ruler of Pisces, it's the old ruler of Pisces, stationing, and Sedna, also a goddess of the oceans, she will be stationing as well. We're going to see Pallas entering an extended transit. We'll have a small but important connection between Saturn and Chiron, and we will have Mars stationing direct. Thank you, gods. That's going to be this month as well. So let's begin talking about this build-up of energy in Pisces, because as we come into the months, I've just put the chart here for the 1st of February. You can see we've actually got the moon here at the moment, and also Saturn, of course, Venus, Neptune, and now we also have the North Node as well. So that transit started in January, so it's going to be there for the next 18 months. But at the moment we have this wave of energy building up here because on the 1st of February we're going to have Venus conjunct Neptune and also the North Node, and then a few days later Neptune itself will conjoin the North Node as well. So pretty much for the first week we have this wave of Pisces energy coming through, flooding through. Now Venus is going to change signs on the 4th of February, so I'm going to discuss that in a moment, but still we're going to get all of this stuff coming through that is speaking directly to our hearts, all this spiritual stuff coming through that is connecting with the heart. This is very soft and sensitive, and it feels like it's quite a sort of counter to some of the harder aspects that are going on at the moment and the harder movements that are happening at the moment. It feels like there is this constant background singing. I'm getting the impression of like a choir singing, but ever so quietly. And it's almost like in quiet moments we can hear the choir, and it helps us to find our direction. We've got to listen for that soul song, says the North Node in Pisces, conjunct Neptune and Venus. We've got to listen to that soul song. And for some of you, if music is not your thing, because it might literally be the thing that calls us, because Venus is about harmony and Neptune is connected to the higher arts. If it's not music for you, then maybe it is art, or it might be art in nature, the art of nature, Mother Nature, the cosmos, looking up into the skies and wondering what else is out there. Anything that stirs your heart, anything that brings up those feelings of compassion. We want to actively generate feelings of kindness and compassion whilst we have Venus, Neptune, North Node all in play here, because the North Node in Pisces is telling us this is what we need to develop over the next 18 months. It's important that we are in touch with what is going on in the heart and that we have the capacity to love. We cannot afford to wall ourselves up, to shut off the heart. I know it's easy to do sometimes when we've been hurt personally in relationships, or when the world itself just seems like a hard and hurtful place. We try to shut off because it's too much. And of course, Saturn in Pisces, further away from this gathering, but still there in Pisces, is saying, yes, sometimes it is important to set boundaries. Set boundaries to keep yourself safe, but don't set your boundaries or your walls so high that you're not feeling anything. So this is one of the stories that we come into the month with. It's interesting that it's all happening around the pagan festival of Imbolc as well, which is the first stirrings of spring in the northern hemisphere, of course. So this is the first stirrings of spring, the first light that is coming through. And again, it's about tending to that light, looking after those tender first signs of life. On the 4th of February, that is when Venus breaks away from this pattern and moves into Aries. She will still be conjunct the North Node and Neptune, but of course now is in a different sign, so it's a dissociated conjunction. Venus moving into Aries is important because, firstly, she's moving on to that 0 degrees of Aries, which is, if you watched my video for the year ahead, I talked about how the 29th degree of Pisces and the 0 degree of Aries are really, really active this year. And it's important because Venus is actually going to station retrograde in about 40 days-ish time. So Venus is going to station retrograde in Aries and then go back into Pisces. So there's going to be an extended journey through both of these signs. So with Venus coming into Aries, it's important to remember that she's going to be coming back this way. In other words, issues around relationships or what we're attracted to, these may be situations that we come back to because Venus is going to come back to this degree. So she will actually just be in Aries until the 27th of March, and then she will go back into Pisces. Obviously, I will be talking a lot more about the Venus retrograde as time moves forwards. So Venus goes into Aries, and then also on the same date, Aries ruler Mars forms a square to Chiron. Actually, I just realized I didn't talk about what Venus in Aries actually means. So it's kind of interesting that these two things are happening on the same day. Venus in Aries. Venus is somewhat uncomfortable. Traditionally seen as uncomfortable in this sign. It's my own natal placement, so I can appreciate some of the discomfort, some of the things that I've personally experienced in my life. One of the common manifestations of Venus in Aries is that we tend to be the one doing the chasing. And that sometimes that energy for chasing after the things that we're attracted to or the people that we're attracted to, we tend to burn out with that. And we can lose interest very quickly, or we can feel like I'm happier alone. Venus in Aries in the natal chart is a lifelong lesson in self-love. And that, again, is something that I have personally experienced. Of course, it doesn't mean that all of us with Venus in Aries is never destined to have a relationship. But it does mean that someone with Venus in Aries is likely to need to have their independence whilst in a relationship. This is someone who is very passionate. Aries is a fire sign, and it is confident, and it does want to have adventures and express itself. But with Venus going into Aries now, for all of us, we're getting some kind of lesson about self-love and how to practice that so that we can connect with other people. Because Mars square to Chiron is feeling disarmed, it's feeling wounded, it's feeling hurt. And how we react, Mars. What do we do, Mars, when we're hurt, Chiron? Now, if we don't love ourselves enough, if we don't have any self-esteem, if we don't have any self-worth or little self-worth, then that kind of energy can turn in on itself, and we start to blame ourselves and we pick fault, and we become scared to do anything or scared to pursue anything because we're afraid that we'll never get what we want. Mars square to Chiron is that feeling that we're not allowed to have what we want. So This combined with Venus moving into Aries and kind of feeling like maybe I've just got to do all of this alone, we can see that there are some shadow expressions here that we just need to have a look at. Remember that your wounds can actually be the source of a strength. When you learn more about your woundedness, when you bravely, confidently face your woundedness, then you can discover great strength from that. And of course, practicing self-love is always going to increase confidence. Jupiter also stations direct on this day as well. So things are beginning to turn around. Jupiter is the planet that is associated with our faith and our belief and our joy, and it generally represents expansion. Things can develop here, says Jupiter, and currently in Gemini, it says we can develop the way that we communicate with one another. We can develop our knowledge. We can learn more. We can speak each other's language, maybe literally, or it could be just learning to be able to communicate better with one another. But certainly there might be some big choices that are coming in now that we've had some time to reflect upon. What am I learning? What do I know? And now we feel like we know better because Jupiter is stationing direct, and we can put some of those lessons into practice so that we can go further in life, or that we can make these better connections that Jupiter is suggesting. On the 7th of February, that is the date that Neptune perfects its conjunction to the North Node. Just pay attention to what dreams you've been experiencing around this time. Write your dreams down. I always say this, write your dreams down. And also pay attention to what you're daydreaming. You might also find that this is a time where we get lots and lots of synchronicity coming through, because this is all about sort of direct communion with spirit, with our deity, whatever it is you personally believe in, even if it's just your higher self. There is something speaking to us at a subliminal level, and so we might find that there are lots of pieces of information kind of flooding through to us in very imaginative ways. So synchronicity tends to be the way that the universe speaks to us. On the 9th of February, talking of connection, communication, or communion with the universe, we're going to have the Sun, which is like the creator, conjunct Mercury. So this is the superior conjunction. So basically means that Mercury is now at its farthest point away from us. It's at apogee. So we've got a lot of distance between ourselves and Mercury right now. So maybe then we are kind of really finding our thoughts are out there at the moment, that our minds are roaming into this far-reaching territory, really thinking about the future, particularly with Mercury and the Sun being in Aquarius right now. But perhaps it's hard to catch hold of what these ideas are, hard to visualize where it's actually going. Obviously, we're getting all of this visual stuff coming through with Neptune and the North Node over there in Pisces. It's super imaginative. But we've got to kind of allow time for these ideas that are coming through to develop, because Mercury will disappear in the skies because it'll kind of be lost in the rays of the sun for a few weeks now. So we've got to give these ideas some time to develop. On the 9th of February as well, we're also going to have Mars trine to Saturn. So that's a very kind of be practical, just kind of take one step at a time. They're both in water signs. So this is also about controlling our feelings and channeling our feelings. That's probably a better word. Channeling our feelings into something constructive, especially as, Mars is retrograde at the moment. So we might find it really hard to be sort of accomplishing goals in the outside world right now, or it's just kind of not really happening, or it's taking longer. But there are still some things that we can do, and we can still plan. We can still channel these feelings into projects that are important to us. So Mars trine to Saturn is a really good way of using some of this more nebulous energy that's going on in the background. So just try and do something practical. It might even be, decluttering, cleaning out the closets, anything like that, especially as both these signs are kind of associated with things behind the scenes, because Cancer is about home, where we shut the door on the world, and then Pisces is connected to more the unconscious. So these are the invisible places in our lives that other people don't see. We can clear these up whilst Mars is trine to Saturn. Talking of cleaning, Hygeia enters Taurus. This is on the 10th of February. So Hygeia is the goddess associated with health and hygiene. She has been here before because we had a retrograde of Hygeia. So Hygeia was in Taurus. She went back into Aries during the retrograde, spent quite a long time there, and now is coming back to Taurus. So we might have a feeling that something that we'd been working on that didn't seem perhaps very healthy, that needed to be cleaned up metaphorically or literally, now starts to seem a little bit shinier. It starts to feel like it's getting clearer, and Hygeia will actually reach the point where she stationed retrograde on the 5th of March. So that's when she's out of the shadow period from the retrograde. Hygeia in Taurus, generally speaking, Hygeia is a seer. She looks ahead. She figures out, what preventative action do I need to take to ensure that this area of life is being taken care of. So we're needing to clear up, clean out, sort out, prevent problems in the area of life that is connected with Taurus. So this is our money, our finances, our resources, our security in all meanings of that word. So not just financial security, but our emotional security. What's going on here, says Hygeia? What's happening here? And how can we practically do things to make this area of life even more secure? And this is going to translate in your own personal chart as well. Wherever Taurus is in your personal chart, Hygeia is coming along to do some cleansing and cleaning and just generally getting this part of life spick and span so that you feel more secure here in wherever that area of life is. So that's going to be indicated by the house that it's taking place in your own chart. On the 11th of February, Sedna will station direct in Gemini. So she is still on that 0 degrees of Gemini. So it's kind of interesting, actually. I'm suddenly thinking about all the stuff that's been going on with social media, particularly recently. I'm recording this on the 9th of January, so quite early on in the year. And we've just had all of this stuff about Mark Zuckerberg sort of deciding to remove fact checkers from Facebook and, well, all the Meta platforms, so Instagram and what's the other one, Threads as well. So that's sort of suggesting there are some big changes coming with social media. And obviously these changes have been in the works for a while. Sedna has been on this 0 degrees of Gemini for a while. And there's a connection between Sedna and Pluto. I've talked about this before. It's generally speaking about the evolution of consciousness. I'm not quite sure how our consciousness is evolving when it comes to social media. I kind of feel it's going the other way at the moment. It's like devolving. But anyway, slightly personal opinion there. But generally, we could say, if we take the personal stuff out of it, we could just say that the way that we are communicating is once again changing. With Sedna stationing direct, it feels as though we are starting to figure out something about how this is changing us, how this is transforming us. Remember, Sedna herself was changed. She was changed by a very difficult situation. It was through betrayal. She was changed because her father betrayed her. And she was bitter and angry for a while. And then eventually she was transformed into a goddess of the oceans. And so sometimes the shadow of Sedna can mean that, yes, we can feel bitter about the past and bitter about what's happened. And yes, sometimes she can speak of betrayal. And with that trine up there to Pluto, yes, it's a couple of degrees away now, but still that energy is in play, that feeling that there are some toxic things going on that betray us as a species, as a collective. It speaks of our shadows, all of this toxic stuff in the way that we communicate with one another is an expression of our shadows. And so with Sedna stationing direct, it just seems to suggest that something is becoming a little clearer, and maybe we're starting to see perhaps even just a few communities, a few neighbours are starting to see how we could better connect with one another. So that'll be interesting to see how that manifests. On the 12th of February, we're going to have a full moon in Leo. I will be talking a lot more about this over on my Patreon or my Substack. I do a full Astro Tarot reading podcast for each lunation. So if you want to have a listen to that, then the links are below. So the full moon in Leo means that we are at the peak of the lunar cycle, and some of the issues that are most prominent now are connected to Leo themes. So we're looking at royalty, we're looking at theatre, actors, kings, queens. These are the kinds of characters that are in play or uppermost when we have the full moon in Leo. But also, this is generally about attention. What kind of attention are we getting? Is it the type of attention that we want? Do we feel seen and heard? And so the full moon in Leo is going to emphasize this, and it also speaks of our creativity as well as children and getting in touch with our inner child. So all of these themes are going to be uppermost when we come to this lunation. We will then have Mercury going into Pisces on the 14th of February. That is Valentine's Day in the UK. I'm not quite sure how far that goes across to Europe and the US, but anyway, Valentine's Day. So it's the day for lovers. Apparently, Mercury goes into Pisces, and that's very soft and sweet. Mercury is the mind and how we communicate. Pisces is the last of all the water signs. It's soft and it's sensitive. And so now we do have compassionate and kind communication. These are soft whispered words in the ear. It kind of feels really sweet. However, it can also be mumbling. What did you say? I don't know what you're trying to tell me. Did you forget to take the bin out? It kind of is a little like this as well. Mercury going into Pisces can be forgetful. In shadow, it can also be confused. The mind is muddled by all of these feelings. The mind is distracted by all of these ideas that are flooding up from the imagination. It is wonderfully imaginative. It's great for writers and artists and sort of all creatives. But those ideas, like dreams, can just kind of disappear the moment you think them. Like the moment you wake up and you're thinking, oh, I was dreaming. Oh, no, I don't know what it was. And so it just kind of evaporates. That's very Mercury in Pisces. And like I say, in communication with one another, things can get a little muddled and people don't necessarily say what they mean. So again, the shadow expression of Mercury in Pisces. On the 16th of February, Pallas will enter Aquarius. This is super important because it's going to be for the rest of the year. Pallas will stay in Aquarius right up until January the 26th, 2026, because Pallas is going to have a retrograde in Aquarius. So Pallas is the sister of Mars. Pallas Athena, is the goddess that is associated with creative intelligence. She is a warrior, but the way she acts is to find a way to mediate. She always wants to find a peaceful resolution to a conflict. She uses her head. That's the difference between her and her brother. Sometimes we do need to actively defend ourselves, and that is Mars. Sometimes we do need brawn, but other times we need brain. And certainly with Pallas going into Aquarius, the sign of the higher mind, but it's also the sign that's associated with groups and communities and society in general. It's also a sign that I associate with politics as well. So Pallas going into Aquarius, the problem solver, Pallas, is saying the way that we can solve problems during this time is firstly collectively, because Aquarius is about the group. So we need our friends on side, or we need to speak to our friends, or there is somebody amongst our friends that can help us with resolving the problem. We also need to engage our communication skills. We maybe also need to think outside of the box, because Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, the modern ruler. We need to think outside of the box, but also not forget that there is traditional wisdom available. Aquarius is also ruled by Saturn. So it's not just kind of throwing everything up in the air and seeing where it falls. We do have to tap into traditional wisdom to understand how to break the rules, rather than just breaking the rules of the situation. So Pallas going into Aquarius is really encouraging us to think outside of the box and engage with other people. Kind of our group connections is going to help us to figure out the problems that we're experiencing. And also, this is where we can get really creative with life as well. On the 18th of February, we enter Pisces season with the sun going into Pisces. Traditionally, this can be a quieter time as we are moving into this restful period before the sun goes into Aries in March, and then we start the whole cycle again. So it is a really good time to think about, how can I rest and relax more? Where do I need to retreat? So that's going to be indicated by where the sun is traveling in your personal chart. Whichever house has Pisces on the cusp, that's the area of life where you need to be more imaginative, but also you need to know sometimes when to back off, when to surrender, when to make sacrifices, when to make peace with what is. So the sun entering Pisces is going to illuminate all of these issues, which is even more important right now because of the North Node moving through Pisces, and we've still got that connection there with Neptune as well. On the 20th of February, Juno is going to enter Sagittarius. That's actually going to be very short-lived because Juno will only get to 1 degree Sagittarius, and then she's going to retrograde back into Scorpio. But for now, Juno going into Sagittarius says when it comes to relationships, contracts, agreements, the idea of commitment, it's very important that we have the big picture view. We need to make sure that we're kind of expanding our horizons when we're thinking about these themes. The fact that Juno is going to go back into Scorpio suggests that this is also a sign, Sagittarius, that is connected to religion and faith and belief. And so it feels a little like, particularly in long-term relationships, that we're kind of going through a phase where we're being asked to look at, do we believe in us? Do you believe in us? And if not, we're going to have to go back into Scorpio. We're going to have to do some deep diving into why or how we can get that faith back in one another. And if it's not in a relationship, it's the faith within ourselves. Do you believe in yourself enough to commit to this adventure called life? That's another way that we could express Juno going into Sagittarius, then retrograding back into Scorpio. On the 23rd of February, Ceres will enter Pisces. So look at the build-up of energy here. We've got Ceres, the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, the North Node, Neptune. That's a lot of emphasis on Pisces. Your Pisces house in your natal chart has all this focus. So it's very likely that that area of life is going to be getting quite a lot of attention during this time. Generally speaking, Ceres is the great mother. She speaks of nurturing and nourishment. She can also be great gain and great loss as well. And so with Ceres going into Pisces, we're really kind of looking at nurturing and taking care of the soul. Spirituality is Pisces. We need to really take care of our soul, to nurture our spirituality during this time, to give our imagination good things to consume so that we're not scaring ourselves, that we're not fearful of losing everything. Remember, Ceres lost her daughter for a period of time, and then eventually there was a deal brokered so that she could have her daughter back for 2 seasons each year. But sometimes Ceres in Pisces can echo that feeling of loss and sadness. And so sometimes we also need to grieve the things that have passed. Many of us have experienced actual loss in our lives, the loss of loved ones, people who have passed over, pets who have passed over. And sometimes Ceres going into Pisces can just sort of tap into that grief. And I'm speaking of myself here as well, because it's only recent that my friend passed away right at the end of September last year. So that grieving process is something that it always does come in waves, and sometimes those waves are big waves and they just knock you to the ground, and other times those waves are gentle and they can even be soothing to have some of these memories and echoes coming from the past, and sometimes that can actually carry you. So Ceres in Pisces can bring all of these kinds of issues into play. So just to be aware that if you are getting waves of grief coming up about the past, that this is kind of natural with Ceres in Pisces, but obviously if it's complex grief, or if it's really becoming problematic, then do consider speaking to a counsellor or grief specialist. On the 24th of February, Mars will station direct in the sign of Cancer. So actually this might echo some of the things that I was just talking about there, because the sign Cancer is also associated with the past and our history. So there's been a lot of history stirred up, and as any planet is stationing, then we tend to get a lot more ripples kind of building up. But at the end of the day, Mars is stationing direct. Thank you, gods, because it's been quite a one with this retrograde. It's been quite tough, I think, on a lot of people. So Mars going into direct motion, generally now we're starting to feel like we've done this deep dive to explore what we want, what we need, and how we're going to get it. And now we can start to make some tentative first steps towards these goals, these new goals or renewed goals, with some kind of renewed passion. We must note, though, that the shadow period will last up to the 2nd of May. So we're kind of still going over some old ground until that time, but hopefully with a sort of clearer motivation and more energy with Mars now in direct motion. The 27th of February, we will have this connection between Saturn and Chiron. It's a semi-sextile. It's a neighbourly kind of aspect. So Saturn, of course, is in Pisces, and one of the big stories of Saturn in Pisces is that it's about getting a handle on our imagination and not allowing the inner saboteur collectively to cause damage, to kind of stop us or limit us in any way. And so Saturn in Pisces is trying to manage the imagination and to master the imagination so that we can build a dream, we can build our vision. That's the primary message of this transit. Now, the connection with Chiron puts us in touch with the things that hurt, the things that we're concerned about, the things that we're afraid of. With Chiron in Aries, then there is a woundedness around whether we can go after the things that we want. There's a woundedness when it comes to our sort of feelings of independence. And also there's a woundedness when it comes to sort of feeling energized and passionate and excited about things. And maybe we're just scared of going into new territory because we don't know what's going to happen. And so Saturn in the background here is sort of saying to Chiron, it's okay. You know, you are strong enough to do this. I'm going to manage this. I've got you. It's okay. You can heal. There are ways of doing this, even if you're not fully healed. You don't have to be perfect to pursue your passion or to go after what you want. Nobody's expecting that. Just do your best. That's Saturn, hard-working Saturn. Just do the best that you can do. Don't be hard on yourself. So this is a sort of really nice connection between Saturn and Chiron. It's a helpful movement that gives us some stability. It's almost like an anchor. It's giving us an anchor or a rock to kind of lean on when we're feeling a little vulnerable. The final aspect of the month is a new moon in Pisces. This is going to be on the 28th of February, the final day of the month. And as I mentioned before, I will be doing a full exploration of this lunation and astro tarot reading podcast over on my Substack and also Patreon. Generally, though, this is the beginning of the lunar cycle, and look how much is going on in Pisces. We now have Ceres, the moon, the sun, Saturn, Mercury, North Node, Neptune, all this wave of energy going on in this sign. Now, the new moon is actually not conjunct any of those planets, but because there is so much kind of watery energy here, we have to be very conscious that things do seem a little wavy, uncertain. It feels like we're flooded with a lot of feelings. And also I'm noting that this lunation is actually square to Jupiter as well, the co-ruler of this sign. So it does feel like there's a lot of huge overwhelm that may be connected with information systems or some kind of communication, or maybe it's just big stories. It could even be big stories that are centering around loss, because there is so much going on in Pisces at the moment. So I do think that it would be helpful to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves around this time. I spoke earlier about how it's important to have some boundaries whilst Saturn is in Pisces. And I think just when we have this much Pisces energy at work, it is very easy to get swept away, especially with that square to Jupiter. We get swept away by public opinion. We get swept away by, all of this stuff that's coming at us from the outside world. And it's very easy to get knocked off balance and to feel very tired. That's one of the classic signatures of when our boundaries have been encroached upon so much that we're just leaking energy everywhere. And if you're particularly sort of psychically sensitive, then it's very important around this time to do some auric protection work. And everybody, if you're just feeling tired, then carry some hematite or just ground yourself. Anything along those lines is going to really help to sort of ward off energy that you're sort of picking up on. We tend to be a lot more open with all this Pisces in play. And so if you're very, very open, you're picking up on everything that's going on in the ether, the good, the bad, the indifferent. You're getting all the impressions flooding in from other people. And you can imagine how that can be very overwhelming. And one of the worst things about it is that something I personally get sometimes when I've kind of forgotten my own self-care is that I start to find it very difficult to differentiate between what's my feeling and what someone else is feelings. What's going on in my community? Is it me that's feeling like this, or is it something that's going on out there? And so yes, that can get very confusing very quickly, and then we can become very ungrounded and we don't really know what we're doing, and then here we are in Pisces territory again, and we feel like we're drowning in all of these feelings. So like I say, do what you can just to protect yourself in whatever way is right for you. For some people, it can be as simple as saying a prayer to whatever you personally believe in, with the intention of, I am protected. And that's enough. You don't need to do really complex things. Sometimes a quiet prayer can really help to change things. And that's not just for protection, it can be for all things. When we're in Pisces land, we are very close to these other spiritual energies. Sometimes you do just have to ask your angels, ask your higher beings, your guides, your guardians to watch over you, and they will. This concludes my reading for February 2025. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please give me a like and subscribe. It really does help the algorithm. And if you would like to hear more from me, I have my website, Substack, Patreon, all my social media links below. I will see you again soon. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.